community building, everyone that you meet. And from there, I realized I was doing still life painting. So I did a menagerie of paintings, but I had one that was a still life of Cuban coffee, and it was Pilon coffee. So it was naturally a painting about commercial products. So it had a very strong pop art vibe, but it had all the qualities of a traditional illusion painting where there was space, lighting, reflected light, volume. It wasn't flat by any means. But from the reaction that I had to that, I then fast forward to 2012 to the next Artomatic exhibition that I participated in. I had gone fully flat pop art with Goya beans and Ricky Ricardo and Celia Cruz, featuring Prominent in a piece about what do you call it? Assimilation, cultural assimilation. And soon after that, I came to know a gentleman named Lenny Campello, and he really helped guide and help me understand ways to connect with art exhibitions and the process of applying to them. And you know, he's really good because when he's curated, even when he's curated a show and he happens to be there giving a curator's talk, you know, the artist will be around him and they literally will ask him shop questions, you know, like artist to artist. And he'll be answering them saying, oh, you should exhibit here and you should exhibit there. So he helps you in that way. You know, he's constantly offering help, and there's a lot to learn there. So that's 2012. Then I continue to push myself and create work and apply at different shows. And I now have a studio in Riverdale, a painting studio, and I have a home studio that's a digital studio in Hyattsville. And my practice was painting and digital printmaking during this time, 2012. I had a home studio. It was very cramped. It was packed to the gills. And I had an opportunity to show in 2014 over at Black Rock in, I think it's in Germantown. And I realized I needed a bigger space because I needed to work on like 5 paintings at once if I was going to create the body of work that was going to fill that space up. So this is 2013. I know I have the show in 2014. So I find a location, I get a studio that was like 190 square feet or something like that. So I start painting, I get the body of work together. And that whole studio experience is its own story. So I won't take up too much time there, but that was an adventure in itself. It was about $150 rent per month, you know, but there were reasons why it cost that much. And that was the event. It was very hot. It was a glass blowing. Here, I'm going to tell you the story anyways. It was a glass blowing studio, and it was very hot when they ran the furnaces. It was always 30 degrees hotter than the outside temperature. So wintertime, 30 degrees, you're in shorts and flip-flops, okay? So it was very warm in there. And but it was a great experience, and I grew a lot there. And so ever since then, I've had some really great opportunities getting my work in the DC Art Bank. I have 2 pieces in there. I've shown at the Foundry Gallery, Alper Initiative, American University's Touchstone Gallery in DC, Joan Hisakawa Healing Arts Center. And like I mentioned earlier at the beginning, shown several times, been very fortunate to have shown at the the Cap Hill Galleries, the Capitol Hill Galleries where Sonia and I had met, which is they're what's the name of their group, Sonia? They have a name to a group. I'm going to stop there. I don't want to embarrass myself. Capitol Hill Figure Drawing Group or something like that, or
they're independent from the Capitol Hill Artists Workshop.
Okay, so they're independent. That's my mistake. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've shown there, and I have a. So I was growing my family at this time, and I always was under a time crunch. I never had enough time to draw. I never had enough opportunity to get stuff done. So my work around that was to work digitally. So all my work, I got into a practice where I would create all my work digitally. So it was like cut and paste collage out of websites and stuff like that. And sometimes I would take my own photographs, but even for my own photographs, I'd like very roughly cut out the shapes of the objects I want, place them on a table and say, all right, this is a still life. I've got it organized like this. This is, and the light's going to come from here. And then I would make everything up on the canvas. I might project it, or I might print it out and transfer it, with graphite paper. But the whole practice was that I was doing work digitally. And then that's how I grew into giving myself permission to become a digital printmaker. I had a printmaking background as part of my BFA. But a printmaking studio is really expensive, more expensive than a painter studio to set up, because a printing press costs like $2,000, $3,000. So I found that I still approached it the same way as how you would engrave a plate. You have to think about your drawing and all that. And I did a lot of testing, but I would make digital drawings that then would become limited edition prints. And that's how I started with the printmaking aspect of my practice. And I'm going to leave it there because I think throughout the presentation, I'll probably fill in other gaps about my story. So.
Perfect. Thank you. So you both collaborated on the piece that's behind you right now, Rick, and I just want to know, can you tell everyone about this collaboration and how you went about it, how long it took? And really, there's so much content in there, and I can pull up a slide and show everyone a little bit closer.
So I just want to say that my background image is that work that's on the screen now, but in one of the progress shots, as we were developing the artwork. I thought it might be nice, to be able to show a contrast between the two. And it also came about by accident. We were trying to figure out what our backgrounds would be, and I happened to have this on my desktop, and I threw it up. So it was a good accident. I think accidents are good in your art practice.
Absolutely.
So about this work, and I'm just going to say one thing. When I, just to start stuff off, I don't think Sonia and I really knew what we were starting when we did this work. And it was part of our process that started. What was that year you said that you became a member of the Torpedo Factory? Because that's just
2014.
Yeah, so around 2014, we started approaching each other after meeting at the Hill Center to see if we could work together. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to work together. And I was getting ready for that exhibit at Black Rock in 2014. And I was working in the glass studio. And I had Sonia come over, and I went over to her studio, but then I had her come over, and we worked in my hot studio, trying to create some work. It wasn't this work, but it was the spirit of this work. And at first, we showed together twice, and our work was influenced by each other's collaboration, but we actually hadn't worked physically on a piece. I think there's more to say to this, about this piece, but I want to turn it over to Sonia so I don't just monopolize the whole conversation. But I thought it was interesting to say that when we started this piece, we didn't have a preconceived idea of what we were
really
doing.
Didn't.
I'll give you an opportunity to say something about it, and maybe we can go back and forth on it.
Yeah, well, and I'll back up a little bit and just give a little bit more of a timeline. So the two times that we showed together before that, we showed together at Artists and Makers first in 2016. And then a year later, 2017, we showed together at Foundry Gallery. And so those collaborative times, and they weren't really collaborative as much as just trying to get our head around it. The first one, we just kind of put the works that went together. You know, you were working on superheroes, I was working on superheroes. I had some fairy tales, you had some fairy tales, and we just hung them together. Right. The next year, because we had more of a relationship going, we were responding to each other's work in our own work. Like I was stealing your ray guns and those kinds of things. We were borrowing symbols from each other, but it still wasn't that full collaborative on one piece together until
But we had a collaborative where we were texting ideas to each other. We were sending images. So you in Virginia, I'm in Maryland, and we are sending these messages. We had occasion for phone meetings, but we had a dialogue that was influencing each other's work, our color palettes, our subject matter, what we were connecting about. And that certainly has grown. Keep going. Sure. Yeah.
So then you introduced me to this huge roll of this raw canvas. And it intimidated me in a couple of different ways. I'm not used to working that big. I'm not sure I'll ever work that big again, to be honest, unless you push me again, and then I'll be happy to try it again. And then the other thing about it that was unique to me was that material, that really heavy raw canvas. It had a lot of problems to overcome from the way that I was used to working on paper. You know, I couldn't go immediately to collage because I didn't know how to fix things yet. I eventually solved that. So a lot of it was just problem solving, you know, how to get the images on there. We were projecting images, we were using
we used all manner of device
transfers of all kinds, and finding what would work with this unique material. It wasn't an obvious answer for either one of us, I don't think.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because being a painter, it might be, you know, everyone might have the idea, well, canvas, that's a material that, you know, Ric might be used to, or it might be something easy to work on. I have to admit that, and I think purposely, I threw us both into the deep end of the pool, and I didn't really,
I think.
Yeah, because we both had to work through how to interact, how a mark that I made, how I could respond to a mark that you would make, and how you could respond to a kind of mark that I could make. And sometimes it was simultaneous, we would be working at the same time, and other times there was the need to take a step back and return to our respective studios and develop some work that would then, when you came back to visit, would get applied to the canvas, you know?
Right.
Maybe sometimes it took a little time away to figure out, is it an image transfer, or is it a moment where we project? Do we cut out a stencil? Like, I wasn't sure of the placement of the blah, blah, blah that was on there. I mean, I knew roughly, but I didn't know if it was going to work. So I cut out a stencil, a giant stencil with those words on it, to allow me to figure out how to place it. While other items were just paper transfers, you know, glue gelled onto the surface, you know.
It definitely looks like you're having a conversation, and I see the different elements of this piece and how they're speaking to each other and how the overlapping is taking place.
Right, we were approaching it as a conversation, and I think Sonia, like Sonia said, that our work speaks to each other. That 2017 exhibit really found us working independently, but where our work was communicating either through color palette or through composition or subject, we somehow were speaking to each other in those works. And it was great to see it translate to this large canvas. A lot of the time I was trying to operate as if I was half of Sonia's brain. And that, I didn't want to just overwrite her work and be like, well, I think this is better. I would look at it and say, well, she's placed that there. How can I respond to it and not obliterate it?
Yeah, I think we were both very careful about that, not to overtake and overwhelm it, and not to have it be a balance of the two voices, because it really does make it better.
Yeah.
does.
And I think we both grew because of that attention to that detail.
I think you did a great job. It looks like nothing is in the background. Everything is brought to the forefront. Nothing really gets lost in there. You just have to take a minute to kind of let your eye go back and forth to see everything that's in there. And then you did an amazing job at that, I think.
And I think our first time we were kind of trying to figure out what it was going to be about. And, my strategy was just to compositionally put several images in front of us before even applying them to the canvas and try and suggest an idea. And we started to come up with a skull and humanity, and then I found some angels from a tattoo magazine, and I started to put those together, and Sonia would look at me like, what are you doing? And I'd say, well, what, in a lot of great works, the literature or movies, it's conflict. It's conflict that well, what do you think about this? Maybe it's we have a lot of references to COVID there. We didn't start off. I mean, we started working on this, I believe, in February. COVID really wasn't in the consciousness of pop culture. Zoom wasn't a thing yet. But since we set up this notion of a conflict, a struggle.
Yeah, we had the good and the evil and the big villain and the conflict of the good nature and even the conflict of the city and nature. That's definitely there too, with all the vines wrapping around.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. But we didn't know that it would develop into that until we were reacting to the current situation.
Yep.
So for people who are novice to the term pop as it relates to the art genre, or people who want to know more about pop art, could you discuss what pop art means to you and the motifs and its connection to popular culture, and the symbols that you were also discussing as well?
So, Sonia, do you want to go first?
Sure. I had to actually take a couple of notes on this today. So for me, pop art has that big draw from contemporary and current events, the superstars that we're using, the typography, the advertising. I've got some artist references specifically. Andy Warhol is definitely in that mix. For me, Peter Max, I love him and his bright, beautiful palette. That Yellow Submarine 70s psychedelia is just something that I vibe on.
Me too.
you have a piece titled "To the Max," and it made me think of Peter Max.
Yeah, well, and it's my homage to Peter Max. Yeah.
Yeah, later you have it in the presentation. It's "To the Max." I thought of that.
Yeah. But one of the things that I was doing with my self-portraits when I was printing them on magazine pages, what I was doing is interacting with the advertisements with my own body. And I was realizing at that time that these advertisements are really recreating these folk tales of the fairy tale and trying to repackage it to sell you something. They want to sell you this, that you can be Cinderella for the night. And I got really head wrapped around that idea. And wanted to manipulate it and own it for myself. And so one of the reasons I chose this slide to talk about this was that typography that I have going up the side of the Loco Culo. And it's, to me, that's so many things, but it's that obvious bend on the Coca-Cola script and kind of a jokey, like little haha for me. Like, I know it's bad grammar in Spanish, but I still think it's hilarious. So I like to use it. And that idea of incorporating humor is such an important part of pop art.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead, Sonia. Go ahead.
I'm going to add one other thing, because one of the things that I think is maybe not special to me, but I like to draw on is music. Music really has a big drive for me. And while I was creating this work, funk music especially really drove me. And what I like about funk is the futuristicness of it. It's inherently optimistic because there's a future. You can't believe in a future if you don't have some basic optimism.
Right.
Anyway.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely.
So for me, pop means very much the same that Sonia was describing. It's it's the how artists in the 60s in Britain and in the US took the everyday, what was around everyone, the commercialism, the plastic products, the advertising, and the imagery involved in that, the flatness of it, how everything was printed, and the methods such as screen printing, and adopted those as their way of expression. And Andy Warhol, Peter Max, Robert Indiana, and one that is actually a forefather, Jasper Johns, was also influential in the idea where Jasper Johns said, take an object, turn it into something else, take that object, turn it into something else, is at the core of how I'm looking at the artwork that I apply towards my pop art, which is I look at the object and I look at it again and I try and transform it into something new. And I started my artwork, my body of work originally, and it still is an ongoing body of work, were Latin food products. So very Andy Warhol. And in fact, locally in Hyattsville, back in 2012, 2014, somebody literally said in an art opening, hey, that guy's like the Cuban Andy Warhol. And he ran past me. He didn't even know I was there. I was like, yeah, hey, thanks. So I was actually, you get, so I felt with the public, I felt like, yeah, okay, you get what I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm not ripping anyone off. It is a continuation, an expression, because it's not like, oh, he's like, no, he is the Cuban version of that. So it started in that way. And that's still ongoing. But I looked at all of pop art and I thought, well, how do I push this along? What's the next step? And one person I didn't mention was Roy Lichtenstein. And he had his Band-Aid dots and the comic book characters. And in fact, the reason that Andy Warhol didn't pursue doing more comic book paintings as his pop art expression was because he saw a show of Roy Lichtenstein's work and he says, oh no, there's this other guy in Soho that's doing that work better than I can, so I can't do that. So Roy Lichtenstein, and this was around the time that the particular piece that I have up on the screen came after the time that Sonia and I met, but the time that we started collaborating, like she mentioned, I was working on the superheroes. And at first, my color palette was very different. And it was really troubling because I came to realize that the idea wasn't to create superhero paintings, but to create superhero paintings in the spirit of those comic book panels and in the spirit of Roy Lichtenstein's work, that he was reproducing contemporary superhero artwork that he saw. So that's in the spirit of Jasper Johns for me, where you take an object, you transform it, and you transform it again. So the following transformation is where I turned the word bubbles and I gave it a cultural bent, and I use Spanish words. In this one, in Spanish punctuation, and in this one it says no more. There are other ones that get even deeper into Cuban slang that happens to be in the exhibit, where it says postalita, which translated directly means postcard. But the slang of that in Spanish means a show off. So somebody in your community that is a snappy dresser, it's always about them, and they really push their self-promotion, you know? So the slang would be postalita. So I have in that painting Wonder Woman in the background thinking to herself, you know, what a postalita, and then the caption below it, much like in this No Mas one, reads, she always thought he was a show off. So just like in this one where it says no mas, the translation isn't direct. In that one, there was a direct translation because I wanted to have the English speaker be able to connect with the Spanish word. This piece that's up on the screen, again, it transforms the pop image to contemporary time. This is a subtle homage to the Me Too movement. It's titled 0 Hour. Her wristwatch is set to all zeros, and it's a moment of reckoning. And I thought that if the strongest woman on the planet had to speak out and say no more, that she found strength in those numbers, it really spoke to what was happening in our society and the power that women were coming by just simply not allowing it to that kind of abuse to exist in the shadows, you know. So this piece, the color palette was inspired by Roy Lichtenstein, the artwork by many of the superhero artists from the 1940s, and our own contemporary experiences influence the subject matter of the piece. So I felt it was like a great example of pop art.
Rick, could you just tell us more about your Cuban American experience and the way your heritage has informed your work? You briefly touched on that, and just like to hear a little bit more about that.
So yeah, absolutely. So there's a term Spanglish, and I know that's come into a popular culture now, and a lot of people know what that means, but Spanglish is a bastardization of Spanish and English. So it's a fusion of the two. And you'll have certain words kind of like be replaced or kind of like morphed, like we're coming close to Thanksgiving. So if you were in Miami, you'd say Thanksgiving, you know, it would be this, that's, and I'm not trying to do an accent, it would be that if you were going to park your car, you'd say, I'm going to parquear, you know, which is estacionar, you know, estacionar el carro is saying parking the car, but you're gonna do an action word in Spanish, is parquear. So my artwork is an expression of both the Cuban culture through language, through visuals, through the food, through the cultural figures. You can see some of that in the piece that's currently up on the screen, where it's a callback to the spirituality, the religionism, or the religion that exists in Cuban culture and a lot of Latino culture. But this also speaks to the idea of the pop culture church, the church of popular culture.
Absolutely.
Where you have these images of Jackie Kennedy, and instead of having a sacred heart burning in her chest, it's JFK himself. Another aspect that reflects to my culture is that there's Latin phrasing that goes along with a lot of religious iconography. There's Latin phrasing, and there's a Latin phrase in the bands underneath JFK, which says transit umbra lux permanent. I'm really killing that pronunciation, but it means darkness is transitional, light is permanent. So, you know, there's always a silver lining, you know, the dark moments in your life are only momentarily, for a moment, which, you know, for that moment in history, for her, that was just a brief moment in time. And she obviously moved on, she had her life, but I think it speaks to all of our lives too, that there's a moment of darkness, a moment of challenge, and we all move on. So that particular spoke to the religion in my culture. It spoke to by connection to pop art, because that Jackie Kennedy's face is a appropriation from a Andy Warhol painting of Jackie. So it speaks to it in that way. And around this time, I kind of bounced between two color palettes, one that's very limited and one that's very much like the Roy Lichtenstein, which is in the next slide, which is titled Goya Girl. And this is a painting that I will probably be producing in 2021. This is a digital color study for it. And here's where, you know, I can really shed light on my work process because, as I said, I work out the drawings and color breaks and composition digitally, and then I transfer them to Canvas. That doesn't mean that all the problems have been solved for the composition. There's still several problems that I'm going to need to resolve once I actually take this to the canvas and I start applying the paint and figuring out what's going on. But the meat of the painting is there. And here I take this opportunity where I'm taking pop art, comic book iconography, and I'm turning it just like Jasper Johns would turn it into something else. I've taken the spinach and turned it into a Goya can of beans that Popeye is, that is going to give him his power and his strength, you know? It's just a fun piece. I sometimes entertain myself by doing some lighthearted pieces. This is a great way of perpetuating my culture and connecting it to my American culture. So it has a vibration of both sides, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sonia, there's so much femininity and freedom and empowerment in your work, especially of the female form. Could you briefly touched on it? Could you talk a little bit more about that, those themes?
Sure. So I absolutely identify as a feminist. And I began working mostly with my own image. So I'm not going to desecrate my own image and I'm not going to over-sexualize myself. I was putting a lot of these on the internet. And that's part of the reason I have the name Fierce Sonia instead of, you know, Ric Garcia has, anyway.
I think it's awesome that you're Fierce Sonia.
Me too, definitely.
Well, and it definitely reminds me that, you know, I have to be fierce, just in case I'm not, because sometimes I do have a lot of anxiety and it's a good reminder to just step up and live up to your name.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. So this piece that's on the screen right now actually has a little tiny insert of a self-portrait. In the seam of the magazine cover at the top, there's a black and white female figure with a cow skull tipping sideways. So that's reminiscent from those days of those self-portraits. And the other reason I wanted to highlight this slide is because it helped me see a real moment of growth because of the big canvas that Rick and I had worked on. There was several weeks where we hadn't rectified what the narrative was going to be about. And we just had to keep working on it with this faith to just keep going. It doesn't matter that you don't know what it is. And it really troubled me. I had to know, well, what's the subject going to be? And we just didn't know yet. It was, and we were still working it through. So this piece is a piece that I was also working on at the same time. And I was using some of those same things. You can see where I don't have a central female figure in the middle like I had before. And I'm getting comfortable with having a more complicated, subtle, you don't quite know what it is until it emerges and it becomes itself. And then this piece, like I said, this is just my homage to Peter Max, all those bright colors. I'm finally figuring out how to use the black and white patterns that are also so graphic. And again, with that complication, that Ric helped me be comfortable with. And working on that big piece, and just being in the unknowingness as you're working through the piece and not having to know where the finish line is.
Yeah, and I didn't want to take over from what you were saying about your work, but when I do the digital studies and I have what would seem like a perfectly finished work that I just need to get it to canvas, there are a lot of moments that once it's on there, it's not so much what it's about, but how will the materials finally sit on the surface of the painting that put me through that moment of panic and worry and not knowing that you described earlier. Because the surface is built up from white, from nothing. And even though I have this idea, yes, it's been executed well by a machine that's printed out my hand gestures from a digital tablet. But now I need to bring the human element while still trying to retain all the mechanical aspects that don't show the human hand. So there's this balance. So when I start painting and start building up the canvas, I have those moments of panic that you described with your work, where you don't know if you're going to realize it as well as your study looks, if the final piece is going to be about what you imagined.
Right.
Yeah, and I realized that with the very first piece you were showing, that was closer to the big canvas that we did, where it's not just, we had no idea. At least my panic is about the finished product, how to develop the materials, but not just simply not knowing what it's going to be and having the loosest of ideas is thrilling.
Yes,
absolutely.
It is a roller coaster ride.
Yeah. So did your upbringing prompt a specific reference point within your work, especially because some of the themes are so nostalgic and fantasy-like and dreamlike? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
So I think this is a really fantastic question. It made me remember a memory I didn't really have. I was like, why am I doing it this way? And you helped me remember when I was preschool, I had a set of Noah's Ark sheets that were bright colored and animals all over it. And it had the motif that repeated over the sheets. And I would be the first one awake in the house a lot and have to preoccupy myself to keep the house quiet. So I would make up stories about these animals on these sheets. And I realized that is a lot of what I'm doing with some of the work I'm making now. It's the same colors, it's the same complication. I love that you asked that question and helped me remember that memory. I hadn't remembered that, but yeah, I think it's the set of sheets I had.
That's awesome. I'm glad that question prompted that memory. It's fantastic. And
yes, so for me, and I have to dig deep back to my past, like Sonia did, and I think it has to do with the fact of being a child of immigrants that happened to be about a political diaspora. The past was always better than the now for them. I mean, they had a good now, we had a good life, but the stories was always about the old country, the old times. The music that played was the salsa music and the big band music from the 40s and 50s. And I'm growing up in 1978, okay? 1980. So even in Spanish culture, quite a different kind of music, but they're listening to this nostalgic music. So somehow subconsciously, I think that created this seed, this attraction to older things. So I found myself, and then while I was growing up and really getting exposed to artwork, there was this whole trend in the 80s where there was this nostalgia trend in the 80s, from the printing, from the posters of old orange packets, from the crates, and food labeling and all that stuff. And I found myself being attracted to it. But if I was very serious or very honest with myself as to why I was attractive, I really have to say that it's because of that upbringing with parents who were just longing for the past so much, and that every aspect of your life, you were asking about, well, how was it in Cuba? Did you eat this in Cuba? Is this what you were trying to connect with them while trying to connect with the other culture that was happening around you. But your only understanding was something nostalgic, something from the past. I think it just set a seed. It planted a seed for that connection. But then moving on, like I said, in the 80s, there was all that nostalgia. But then when I'm looking at the artwork from Jasper Johns, Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, Robert Indiana, and you're taking notes from them. You're taking artistic notes from them. I feel that having a nostalgic look or feeling to the work means that much like what's his name, Bublé. He sounds like Frank Sinatra.
Oh, Bublé.
Yeah, Bublé. It's like he's not trying to be like Frank Sinatra, but he understands the genre and he sings and he comes. So I feel that if my pieces feel nostalgic, feel like that drawing quality, then I'm channeling and I'm interpreting that time period properly. So I think it's just what I've decided to do lends itself to being nostalgic. Because I'm looking at that past work and reproducing that idea, but trying to bring it into the contemporary themes, like the one with the Me Too movement, things of that sort. Yeah.
So I'd like to open up the line for any questions that our viewers might have, and I already have one question from Skip Muller. Sorry if I said your last name incorrectly. But the question is, do you ever conflict over color choices? And if anyone else has any more questions, feel free to just put it in the group chat and I will try to get to you.
Pink.
Pink, that's the color that gets you.
Sonia opened my universe up. And I'll let her elaborate.
Well, I'll take it further back. So when we were doing research about doing a collaboration, we went to a show together. And there was a piece by Peter Saul in there that I lit up on, and it was all about his neon colors. I was like, I want to do that. And he should have known then to just run away, because I told him what I wanted to do. Found specific pink that I really that vibes with me. It's an opera pink. As soon as I found it, I copied the notes down here. This is what you need. Add this to your palette. And yeah, it kind of threw him off. He was like, "What do I do with all this Pepto-Bismol stuff?" I was like, "You have fun with it."
Oh yeah, and that's what I said. You really opened up. That's when I knew we were going to work well together, because I'm drawing on one part of the canvas. I'm sitting on like an artist bench, and I'm not really seeing what you're doing. And I'm doing something on another part, and the pink appears, and it starts appearing, and I didn't say anything. I inside, like an atomic bomb went off, not in anger or anything, but in like confusion and.
Right. What do you do with that?
And I just looked at it and I was like, and I knew that my natural reaction wasn't one to poo-poo immediately, was that we were going to do really good work together, because that was a break or make moment. There's a lot of artists that would really start to like overwrite each other and enter into conflict. And at that moment, I was like, oh yeah, we're going to work well together, because I wasn't taking it as I was taking her color choices. I was approaching them with respect, as an opportunity to make a statement through it. And that was a really great moment for me. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it was so much conflict, but more challenge. I think while I'm doing I think my color palette appears to be bright, but I assure everyone that the blues and yellows and reds that are in my paintings are extremely muted. They are not the pure intensity that comes out of the tube. So when the piece, the big large piece that I have as a screensaver, and it's the big collaborative piece, Sonia really brought the color to that. I brought more of the muted influences, and then I embraced her pink, and because there had to be a color harmony as well. So when I began to develop other parts of the painting, I couldn't just create something that was jarring. So I had to harmonize with her, with the color choices that she had made. And we thought that was a great way to bring your voice into the piece, was that I got like a 70s song, you know, like like a funky song in my head right now. No in particular, but there's this funk. Yep.
Yes.
There is this funk 70s vibe to the color palette, and you responded strongly to that work that we saw in the exhibition. And I think we've successfully, you know, in our own way, brought that to the forefront in this piece, because we have those strong colors.
Are you thinking of doing a print of that piece that's behind you, or someone wants to know?
So I think Sonia and I have to discuss that.
Okay.
There's no reason why
we do it. And
yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't.
I'll follow up and say that somebody else has asked, one of our collectors has asked about detail prints of the big piece.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
We can certainly discuss that too.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And here's exactly, I've always felt that you know, you grow as an artist by interacting with other artists, but your audience and your patrons also help you grow. Sonia, I certainly didn't suggest, and I'm constantly suggesting ideas, you know, kind of, you know, quick rich scheme ideas. Hey, let's do this, let's do that. They have that spirit. We had never even come across the idea of doing detail prints from the surface, because there is so much going on in it that there are areas that can really stand on their own.
Yeah.
And that's what I really love.
There are neighborhoods to this.
Yeah, very nicely put. Neighborhoods, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Does anyone have any more questions? I'm gonna wrap it up soon. How are you all feeling? Can I ask you another question that I had?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. And this will be the last question. What current art trends inspire you, or have you been interested in exploring? Or maybe genres, not even trends, just other genres that you think of tapping into. But I feel like you both do so much already, but anything that is inspiring you right now.
Well, if I can.
So I know,
go ahead.
You want to go first?
Well,
Okay.
I was going to say that,
Go ahead. Go.
Okay. I was going to say, just like the Goya Girl, that there's a digital print, there's a digital color study. You know, I have 2 more paintings, and I have about 5 other paintings that are currently underway in the studio. I think I want to slog my way through that work. And I say that I use the word slog because the work that I'd like to explore, and I'm very meticulous in the sense that first I got to get through what I have on my to-do list, which is several paintings. But I'm so eager to explore the technique that we developed for this large canvas. And see how you know, the drips, the loose painterly style, to see how I can apply it to some of my other work, because I felt that working on this piece over the last 5 months, really together and then independently, really gave me a different sense of my skills and how I can grow. Granted, it's going to be a very different working method since Sonia won't be there with me creating pieces, so it'll have a different vibe, but I'm really eager to take a lot of lessons that I learned from this large piece that we developed and incorporate them in future work. So I really want to work quickly through like 5 paintings, 10 paintings that I have planned to get start working on this style. Go ahead,
Well,
Sonia.
and so I'm identifying some of my next goals. I have recently moved from the Washington, D.C. area. I'm now living in a bus on a farm in West Virginia, and it's really awesome, but it's got some unique parameters. I can't work on large canvases anymore, but my work is gonna go smaller again, which I actually prefer. And it's gonna be a lot more personal now. Because I'm not necessarily making work for an audience, I'm making work for my own pleasure. It's so great. I can be really selfish and really stingy and just do the things that I want to do for my own
Don't
self.
you already do that?
Well, but even more so now. I mean, it's going to be crazy.
I mean, my work might
I'm
look
working,
populist, but I do it for myself.
Yeah, well, this is going to be even like it's going to get extreme.
Excellent.
But I'm going to be working more in digital, more with my Procreate. I'm teaching myself Procreate right now, and I'm really loving that. And I want to start learning a little bit more about some video production so that I can stay in better touch with my Patreons mostly. I've started a Patreon account, and it's challenging me to be able to stay in touch with everybody in a really authentic way. So that's on my horizon too.
Do you have an address to your Patreon?
Oh yes, please share.
Can you share that?
I'm not quite sure how to do it. So it's patreon.com/FierceSonia. It's real simple and straightforward.
I think
but
you've
I don't
just
have
done
a
it.
hot link. Yeah, there. Yeah, so part of that, so with my Patreon account, I have a pen pal service so that every month I'm in touch with my patrons, and it's a really fun way. I'm looking forward to it. It's been fun for me so far. I like it.
So I wonder if people are
thank you, Skip.
Yeah, very good, Skip. I wonder if anybody's wondering if how Sonia and I might continue collaborating since she's living further away now. Oh, you're waiting for me to answer that?
Well, I was.
So we're trying to figure it out. And we have one innovative idea for ourselves, which is we're going to try and use word association between ourselves, either through texting or emailing, to begin to create a kind of a subject matter tree, or that we can decide these series of words are going to inspire a particular piece, and just kind of try and create a plan for that. I think it'll work to both our temperaments and will help us since we're so far apart. I think this, we were in 2 different states, and we still are in 2 different states, but we could always jump in a car and within 30 minutes be in each other's studios if we chose to. I think it's a little bit longer of a drive now for both of us. So
it is.
We're going to rely on technology and the mail service to shuttle work back and forth between us. And yeah, it might be smaller.
And you've got 2 characters that you planted in my head that I'm still working on. I'm going to develop a Betty Page and a Princess Leia based on ideas that you've given me.
I'm excited about that. That's awesome.
And very good. And those are two digital prints that I've been developing, a Betty Page and a Princess Leia. And it's a series, a Dream Girl series that I was thinking about. Unfortunately, they weren't ready for this show. I was really hustling and pushing myself to have them ready for this exhibit, but they weren't quite there, and I decided not to overextend myself.
Yes,
Same.
your body of work together looks incredible.
Thank you.
Really great. I just have one thing to say, and then I'm gonna shut it down. I feel like a time lapse of your collaborative work would be fantastic, so you could see the layers and how it like multiplies, and that would be really exciting for people to watch.
Yeah.
Very good suggestion.
Yes.
We
All right.
will set that up with Sonia's digital skills. She'll be developing her video skills. We'll figure out how to edit stuff.
That's right.
Sounds awesome. Great. So thank you everyone for joining us and hanging out with us on a Thursday night. I hope
Thank
you
you.
enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will hopefully be doing more artist talks. This was really exciting. Thank you so much, Rick and Sonia.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, everyone.
So thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Good night. See you.
Good night.